welcome to the Catholic Forge, a conversational podcast where we gather to explore our Catholic faith and discuss how it forms our lives. All are welcome to join in this conversation and journey. Thank you for listening. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Eric in Missouri.
This is Ben in Kentucky.
And this is John in Illinois.
It's time to really pull back the curtain, okay, to everyday life.
What? That is a stupid intro. I think we've used that intro like 6 times. It's time to pull back. What curtain are we talking about here, too? Many curtains should not be pulled back.
That's it is not good manners to interrupt. But
that's true.
I want to let me begin by asking. I've been, very challenged by the wisdom, sort of my new master, Jerry Seinfeld, and his hit web series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And in several of these episodes, they talk about the tips he leaves, and he says, like, he'll ask the other person, like, what would you tip? And he says one thing, I can't remember who he was asking, but he said, is it show business good? And now we went out to dinner last night to a Tree Restaurant, which is actually at Los Cabos here in Independence, Missouri. Wonderful Mexican restaurant. And this confronted me when I was going to tip. It was a $33 ticket. And I thought, what? I mean, I know that like Jerry, if it was Jerry was here, he would leave like $200,
Wow.
That's show business.
I'm in the wrong business. I need to cater for Jerry.
Well, he has like a $750 million net worth, right? So, he can do that. But I was like, what, thinking of that manner is like, what is a good tip? This confronted me, and kind of knowing that we were heading into this conversation, it brought back to mind how often so many of these ideas of manners and the matter of manners gets lost in the roteness of it, at least for me. If I'm not really intentional in thinking about it, it would be really easy just to leave a $5 bill on the table. But I don't know that would be really be just for her or really very good on my part as a gentleman.
It's funny that a comedian is the one that taught you about tipping. Dennis Miller actually is the one that got me thinking about tipping more. He was telling a story. He actually went to a hamburger joint where Sandra Bullock was working, and he didn't leave a good tip, and she complained to him later on after she became famous, and he realized that he needed to tip more. And I heard that, and ever since then, whenever I'm tipping, I think about Dennis Miller telling me I need to tip more.
That's pretty funny.
Comedians are out to get the world tipped.
Well, a comedian hasn't gotten me thinking about it, but Alice has, in her goodness. She has decided, and I can't fault her here, but we get takeout a lot.
Okay.
From this, especially this Indian place in town. So just Saturday night, we got takeout. We're talking, you call it in on the phone. Yeah. 20 minutes later, you drive, you walk in.
Get your pad thai.
You exchange a couple pleasantries with the guy at the counter as he hands you the bag, and you leave. Sure. When you swipe your card, they still give you the same receipt as if you were eating in. There's an option. You can write a tip on there.
Right. I have to write a tip on there.
I never have if it's takeout because I'm just walking out. And the way I always think of it is, well, I'm paying for the price of the food as it is charged. And the tip is for if they are actually waiting on me over the course of an hour as I sit in here,
Sure.
And I never thought otherwise, but Alice's conscience has spoken up, and the other night she wrote in a tip and said, I think we need to start tipping even when we do takeout. We really like their food, and they work hard. And I was like, well, I'm open to this idea, but I haven't thought of it.
I always tip even with takeout food. It's significantly less than if we were
but just a little something.
Always a couple dollars for the cooks and things like that. And
it's nice, yeah. My eyes have been open now. I don't know why I never thought of it before.
I think after having a couple friends that were waitresses and not realizing that literally some of them do not get paid anything for their time, and apparently, I don't know how in America, whatever year this is, that you can do that. You can employ people and actually not pay them.
You can actually employ people and make them pay you. There are some high-end restaurants where you pay to waiter there because the tips are so high. But that's part of the agreement going in. You know that.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. anyway, once this was revealed to me, then I'm always thinking about it, not knowing, is this $20 bill gonna put her over so she can pay her rent or not? And not knowing, is it pooled? Anyway, thanks for listening.
Well, so we can go ahead and cut the first 5 minutes of this episode out, and let's get to the topic.
So we're talking about
let us know in the comments, how you tip, but really, all of this still getting at manners, and I appreciate what Alice has suggested, and that is a mindfulness, an awareness of the whole system that you're engaged in. All the people around you. And so, even though you could talk it away, oh, well, the price of the food and the labor to cook it is included in this and that. But an extension of mindfulness, that's what I'm trying to teach my kids with those most basic, the pleases and the thank yous. That mindfulness, that there's another person involved here. It's not just you getting or receiving or even giving, but an extension of self, going beyond one's self, and that's where manners, I think, help us to really meet the road. Haven't we talked about it before, in that ministry of presence?
It's a funny thing. I actually think as a young person in high school, probably, I really had a bad feeling about manners, the concept of manners. I had thought of more kind of like we see British manners, you watch Downton Abbey or something. There's just this whole rigmarole of all these made up rules and things. And that's often what I thought of with manners, it was kind of this archaic system to keep people under control, stuff like that. And of course, what a pathetic thing that was for me to think. Really, manners are extraordinarily important, and the reason is exactly what you just said. Manners are predominantly about recognizing the other, giving dignity to another person. I see you. I respect you. I have empathy for your situation. The tipping thing, I'm going to participate with you. I'm going to thank you. I'm going to wave to you when you let me in, on the highway. Manners are so important because they are imparting dignity. And that's really why they become important, is because they are about dignity and recognizing the other. And that really changed. And I started seeing that more now with our kids. We make our kids always say please and thank you. When we're in the grocery store, I'll have them say excuse me as they go by people. It's amazing to watch people in the store, how there's no interaction or people don't know how to say excuse me.
Sure.
But because what it says when I say excuse me is I recognize you and I see that you're in that location. I need to get around you. Instead of just cramming my cart around or going through you or pretending you're not there, I'm going to communicate with you.
Yeah.
I don't think we could have a better phrase to sum up the whole episode than that, a recognition of the other, like you said, John. I mean, that's because it goes so much deeper than what's on the surface, because it can become automatic or thoughtless if you let it. But I find that even a thoughtless thank you still goes farther than no thank you at all,
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. That was actually, Ben, you had posed this in the pre-show discussion, the idea of, do we want to dive into that right now? That idea, because about the kind of the empty manners that we do. Sometimes we say responses. Do we want to get to that a little later? Because that you're bringing that up now, it feels like.
Yeah, that's fine. I think we can go on and dive into it.
And I thought about that at first. My first response was, no, we should never do that. And then I was like, absolutely. We should... Because manners are, at least from my opinion, manners being about the dignity of the other person, it doesn't really quite matter how I feel. When I'm walking through the store, if I'm really annoyed with the people in front of me that have no sense that they're walking down the middle of the aisle with their cart oblivious, and
road rules apply at the Meijer, please.
They do. Stay to the left or the right. Oh my goodness! And when you stop to get something. When you stop to get something off the shelf, move your cart over to the side. Don't leave it parallel parked across the aisle.
Get it in the shoulder, right up against the ramen. That's right. Point,
manners aren't about how I feel, because your dignity is not based upon how I feel about you. I still have to treat you with respect and interact with you as another human being, because that's what you are. And so with that, like with kids, What are your opinions on that? Teaching your kids to say thank you or things like that, even when they're not thankful, or to say sorry when they're not sorry. What are your opinions?
Yeah, my thoughts on it have been changed recently. I read this excellent book by a guy named Dr. Ray Guarendi, and he doesn't write, if they, let me word this right, he doesn't write as a Catholic author. In other words, it's not really advertised in your face. His books are, I mean, he's a psychologist by trade. So anybody looking for parenting advice could read his book. Now, if you're a Christian, you're going to get a lot more out of it because he's not afraid to, I mean, he brings God and faith into it and his parenting strategies. But so I was always just, I don't know if it was my instinct or if I had been kind of swayed by modern parenting philosophy, but my instinct up to reading that book was, well, if Evie doesn't really mean that she's sorry, there's no point in me forcing her to say it because it's hollow, it's empty. The other person knows that she doesn't mean it, so it doesn't help them at all. We would just move on with the punishment and kind of let her just wiggle out of the apology if she wasn't feeling it. But then I read this book and he was like, no, you absolutely should force. Now he's talking here about saying in particular, I'm sorry, but I think he actually he extends it to all manners though. Mm-hmm. You should force your kid to say it because in doing that, it's setting up a precedent and it's etching that into their heart a little bit. And even though, yeah, they're going to say it and not mean it, you can see it in their eyes like, all right, I'm saying this, but I don't mean it at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's setting them up with the goal of being an adult who will mean it one day. Because they're learning that when I've transgressed someone, the right thing to do, the decent thing to do, is to apologize to them. So, yeah, I've been converted totally into force those manners. What about you, Eric?
Eric, what were your thoughts? You were shaking your head kind of there.
I am of the same mind. I think especially that's worthwhile. In my mind, I'm translating that in the terms of doing it when you don't wanna. I mean, we practice this in marriage, especially. I'm not saying that either of you have been there, but maybe where you have a certain level of disagreement with your spouse, and your hearts are hardened toward one another. Okay, and the end of the day comes, and the good night kiss, the ritual moment appears, and you sure as shit don't want to. You don't have it in your heart. You don't want to look at him, much less say goodnight, much less I love you, much less kiss, please. But to still do it, to slap it on there, something good might come out of it. But to follow through with the ritual action. I don't know if this is how you approached it, but certainly, I mean, this is how my parents were with me. If it came time for dinner or something and I wanted something, if I just said, I want French fries, they wouldn't respond to me at all. I'd be like, what? Like, I can see the French fries. My nose tells me they're here. My tongue is ready. My body is ready to receive them. And eventually, just like I have done now with Hannah many times and Daniel, I'll say, is there another way you want to say that? And with Hannah, since she can put it all together now, she'll just say, French fries, please. And I'll say, in a full sentence. and now she's really gotten the format down. Daddy, I would like French fries, please. Yeah. Daniel isn't quite there yet, so I'll accept French fries, please, from him because he's 2 3/4.
It's funny. We do the same thing. I'll say, I can't hear you. And then they'll say, Michael will usually say it louder then. Oh. And I'll be like, Michael, why can't I hear you? And he'll say, oh, and he backs up and he says it. And, with the sorry thing, I think there's a bit of a compromise I would offer with it for everyone that's out there appalled saying we should force our children to be sorry. And I'm sure you both already probably do this. We always make our children say sorry when they've done something wrong, whether they want to or not. It's you got to say sorry.
Sure.
But what we do, the compromise is this: is first go sit in timeout. You sit in timeout for however long it is, couple minutes, and then I come over and I say, why are you in timeout? And then they tell me why they're in timeout. So we do a process time first. We say, what happened? Is that the best choice that we can make? Is there something better? And that's something I will often say. Was there a better choice that we could have made? So we do a little bit of process, so they're thinking about it. And so then when they do go to say sorry, they do have something, a recognition where we've talked through it, that there is something that they really need to be sorry for. And as I was reflecting on this, I really came up with a thing. There are at least two basics when we're talking about manners. There's probably more than that. There are compulsory manners, and then there are customary manners.
Sure.
And so, when I went to Thailand, you are at Mass, kiss of peace, nobody shakes hands. They all put their hands together and they kind of bow to each other, and you don't shake hands. And here in America, you shake hands, maybe even you hug. You've got manners that are appropriate, and you want to follow the customs of that culture because you don't want to offend somebody. You want to respect them.
Sure.
But there are compulsory manners too. Those are things like please and thank you and I'm sorry and I forgive you. Those are manners we are obliged to do out of justice. We are required to, when we have done something wrong, we are required by justice to say, I'm sorry. And that's what's so scary to me about that trend you're talking about, Ben, is that my feelings trump reality. The way I feel about it is more important than what has really occurred. And that is such a lie of our society today, is that our feelings are more important. When I've done something wrong, in justice, I need to say I'm sorry. When somebody has given me something out of justice, even if I don't like the person, when I've been given something out of justice, I need to say thank you for that. And so those are things that can't go out into the void without saying them. It's inappropriate. So there's a balance there where we can talk. Well, why we kids, guys, we need to call up grandma and say thank you for the Christmas card, or
sure.
It's important. We can share it with them, but it is important that we do it. And the same thing for us to practice those manners also.
Yeah, so many of those institutions seem to be withering, like the thank you card.
Yes, I'm terrible at the thank you card. I always think I'm going to do it, and then a year later, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've not done it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's. I want to say it's less genuine, but I'd rather just send someone a text right away or call and say thank you for that than totally forget and not do something more grand. And that reminds me of another kind of facet of manners, which has been compromised in our time, and that is chivalry. This whole idea of I think I mentioned before, a gentleman's code, and even in the pre-show I was joking about the Kingswood. What was it? The Kingsmen. All the Kingsmen. Colin Firth not endorsing that movie.
By no means. Please never watch it. Go ahead.
Probably shouldn't see it. It's great, but don't see it. And but in this, they kind of represent this very British, gentleman's code of conduct idea. And now, of course, without meaning any disrespect to feminism or people who feel that this is not complimentary, we hear about this. Don't hold the door open for me. Okay, don't throw your coat down in the mud puddle that I'm about to walk over. Don't do anything for me that makes me less than. And so chivalry in our time, which was supposed to be sort of like an elevated form of manners, that I love. I couldn't find it in time. If I find it, I'll put it in the description box over on YouTube, and you can read it. But this whole list of things, like even when you're walking with your lady, you always walk on the street side, just in case the motor carriage splashes mud, so that she is not tainted by the mud, but you are fully doused. I mean, all these, so very kind of, very kind of magical. But this mindfulness that if you're going to be out with your lady, this is it. This is that level of conduct, instead of what. Well, I'm not saying all men, are bad daters or have bad manners on dates, but maybe we've fallen away from that, because of an assault on that form of manners. So maybe we shouldn't use the word chivalry. I don't know.
Yeah, it does seem like an odd thing that I want to show dignity. I want to show honor and the due respect to the person that I am with.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't do that for some politically correct reason. What a horrible idea. It's not because the person is less. It's because you are actively working to show them through your actions that you recognize their dignity.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
I did once hold the door for a young woman, at least she was younger than me, and she stopped and she wouldn't walk through, and she said, "I don't need you to hold the door for me." I was like,
That's
okay.
precisely why it's a kind action.
I was like, I'm being courteous. I don't want your courtesy. And so I just closed the door. I was like, okay. I didn't slam it in her face and send her to the hospital, but I was like, what do you want me to do? I've extended myself. I've recognized you as a person. You have dignity. Come on in. The air conditioning feels great. I don't know. I don't even remember what it was. And it was really surprising to me.
Well, and I'll hold the door for anyone. If it's a man or a woman behind me, I'll hold the door open for them.
That was just the example, but that's why I appreciate what you said, Ben, about what did you say, Father Garandi, or just Ray?
No, just Dr. Ray.
What he said about it's worth putting a little more pressure on now, so that someday your kids aren't going to be on the flip side of that coin and insulting someone when an important moment comes and they don't have the wherewithal to say please or thank you. Now, of course, we don't imagine our children will actually end up like this, but it sure can't hurt now on the outset. And one thing I wanted to hit on that Ben, you highlighted kind of in some digestive emails, very excellent, is, for lack of a better word, manners in Mass, manners at church. Which I think is beautifully realized for us in a sense in the liturgy. Ben, can you kind of flesh that out here? I know the bell is about to toll on our time together, but can you open the door on that a little bit?
Well, you might be going a different direction than I was with it, so feel free to jump in and add to it. What I kind of meant was this same mindset being needed that we can mindlessly, because Mass is something we do every Sunday, hopefully do every Sunday.
Sure.
You can sit there and rattle off the prayers
without
verbally,
being attached to them.
Exactly, with no mental intention, with no thought as to what you're saying or who you're saying it to. And that's the comparison I was drawing, is that then in our daily lives we can say, when we say thank you to someone, it's kind of like, we're looking down at the ground instead of really making it a point to look at their eyes when we say, hey, thanks a lot, I appreciate that. And so that was kind of the connection I was drawing, or just the same vigilance being needed, because how many times, I admit, how many times at Mass have I gotten halfway through the Our Father and realized, oh, I'm just saying these words, my mind is wandering right now. I need to pull myself back,
Yeah.
So, but did you have another angle on that, Eric? Something that you were thinking?
What I had mentioned at the top of the episode, just that level of mindfulness. Fortunately, of course, the Church in her wisdom has given us these sets of invitations and admonitions. Namely, of course, and most simply of all, let us pray. 3 simple words which begin the ontological change that we experience inside the liturgy, calling us outside of ourselves. And then, of course, Ben, you mentioned yourself in an episode how stirring it is to you, or at least it was. Lift up your hearts.
Oh, yeah.
Get out of yourself. Something is going to happen. And so the liturgy gives us these reminders that we are not here for ourselves. In my position, we see a lot of that. And I don't mean like from the piano, but kind of watching the worship of the people. You can tell, I'm not saying we can know people's hearts, but you can kind of tell when someone is simply there for themselves or for obligation. They really have no interest in anyone else. There's little to no outward sign of participation. They leave as quickly as they can. They arrive as late as they can. And there's no real sense of awareness to anyone else, or maybe, I don't know, how can I say for sure, but even for the reality of the sacrament itself. And for us, we would say that's really bad liturgical manners. You've come in for this feast, and you've left your coat on the whole time, a sign to everyone else that you're just here. What did Jim say?
Sometimes our parish is pretty cold.
What did Jim say in the office? Do you remember the when what he said about making an appearance, that you go.
You go in, you make a memorable thing, take a picture with somebody, and get out.
That's how some people go to Mass. Like, well, as long as I shake Father's hand at the beginning, so he knows that I was there, and then I can sneak out, right after communion. That's how it feels sometimes, John.
Yeah. We're getting into a whole level of
all right.
Of knowledge that I don't have of people's thoughts, but
of course.
Going into this, you bring this up well. Both of you have mentioned this kind of idea about self, and that's manners are the natural prelude to virtues, because they are about the surrender of self. And I saw this in the discussion that you guys were having without me via email, and you had mentioned that idea. It's a valuable point that it's not about self. Manners are the prelude to virtue, because they tell us to surrender ourself. And sometimes there's an awkwardness, and sometimes there is a timidness. I don't want to say thank you, because that means that I have to kind of show a humility in myself. And that's exactly why we should do them, because it is about a surrender of self and living for a higher principle, a higher good, other than just my feelings. When I run my life and operate my life just by my emotional state or how I feel about things, I'm not actually serving anything higher than myself. And so, when I have to say thank you to this person that maybe I don't really quite want to say thank you to them, I'm a little begrudged against them.
Sure.
I have to learn to surrender self. I have to learn self-control. Same thing at manners at Mass, and you brought this up. That teaches me self-discipline. Even there, when we talked about manners in Mass and the connection two different ways. But when I have my children and they're gonna have to sit next to me, we work very hard, sit still. And of course, we're always making noise and rustling around. But we work at our best to stand and to kneel and to be present to the Mass and pray with our bodies. And that teaches our children self-control. The fact that they can sit there for an hour, it is something that's a little foreign to them. Instead of playing a video game or looking at a book or just chewing on Cheerios, all which are great strategies, except for video games, all of which are great strategies at appropriate ages. But as they get older, they learn to surrender self. And that's really what brings about happiness, is being able to surrender and set aside self. And manners are a very rudimentary way in which all of society can learn to do a little self-sacrifice for a greater, higher principle.
No, I agree completely. And what you said, the humility thing, for me, in thinking about this topic deeper than I ever have before, honestly, the humility thing really brought it home of why, because the obvious question is, why wouldn't we be polite? Why wouldn't we, what's the downside? Why wouldn't we use manners? And then it hit me that like so many faults of judgment or sins or whatever the situation, pride is always lurking as a root cause. And that's what you said, is it humbles you and it makes you vulnerable. And for example, there's a couple people at work I'm not as close with as others. And like you said, it's an awkwardness that I've never put my finger on before. Like, why does it feel awkward to just give him a genuine thank you, or to say, if I need him to hand me something, to say please? And it's because I realized in thinking about this that when you do that, you're opening yourself up and you're you're saying, I need you. You're telling another person, I need you.
And what a beautiful thing to say to somebody.
Yeah. But like you said, if you're not maybe too keen on that person, or you just don't know,
oh, it's painful.
Our pride is like, no, I don't need anybody. I'm a grown man. I can take care of it,
Yeah.
Or in the case of the girl in Eric's
absolutely.
case.
I don't need anybody, or I'm entitled. You owed this to me anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
Both of which are very detrimental attitudes to go through life. Both of those are the assured direction of unhappiness, to think that you are entitled to something or that you don't need anybody, and pride. Those are all the path directly to unhappiness. So thank you I think we've talked about this before. Gratitude is one of the greatest paths, the things that lead us to happiness, is to be able to say thank you.
Yeah.
Whenever we've had an episode having anything to do with steps into spirituality, how to get closer to God, anything, gratitude is always like a main component, not by our design, but by some other design. The attitude of gratitude taking you beyond yourself to a new level.
Yeah. Well, if I can just throw this in. So Dickens has this awesome quote, which I wasn't thinking of ahead of time, so I didn't look it up. It's in A Christmas Carol. And he says something about Christmas being that time where you start to actually view other people as fellow travelers to the grave, not just some other race or other species. You start to feel that connectedness. And I love that phrase, fellow travelers to the grave. And if you think of that, if you think eternally when you're dealing with other people, then manners do come more naturally. It's like, wow, this is another soul. They're working out their salvation right now as we speak, as we deal with each other.
Yeah.
The least I can do is say thank you,
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, John.
This has been the Catholic Forge. Thank you for listening. We'd like to close, as always, with a prayer and a blessing. May God the Father,
God the Son,
and God the Holy Spirit bless you, guard you, and lead you to eternal life. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for listening to the Catholic Forge. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and will please leave us a positive rating and a review wherever you listen. You can help out the show in a big way by sharing it with your friends and family. You got someone who needs some work on their manners? Just slip this in their inbox. You can continue the conversation. Let us know about the tipping business, okay? And how big is show business big? Because I want to get there someday. As always, you can continue that conversation with us on Facebook and Twitter. And to get a hold of us, you can reach us at thecatholicforge@gmail.com. For more information regarding the podcast, visit our website at www.thecatholicforge.com. We especially thank our virtuous wives for their continued support of this project, and we thank you very much for listening.
You remember the scene in the first X-Men movie when Rogue is eyeing the tip jar at the bar, and it has a little note on it that says, "Tipping is not a city in China." You guys remember that?
No. That's I will have to go back and rewatch that.